Behind the facade. In the quiet suburbs, the Johnson family was admired for their generosity and unity. Uncle Greg, a jovial and seemingly caring man, was known for taking in his niece, Lily, after her parents died in a car accident. At 16, Lily was a quiet and polite girl, grateful for a roof over her head and a chance to continue her education. Aunt Clara treated her with kindness, and young Jamie adored her like a big sister. To outsiders, the family seemed perfect. But behind the closed doors of their seemingly warm home, Lily's life was far from ideal. It started subtly. In the early weeks of Lily's arrival, Uncle Greg would come to her room under the pretense of checking on her. His action seemed innocent at first. He would kiss her forehead and say goodnight. Over time, those gestures grew more unsettling. The forehead kisses became kisses on her cheeks, and then on her lips. At first, Lily didn't think too much of it. She assumed it was just how Uncle Greg showed affection. But as weeks turned to months, his nighttime visits became more frequent. He would wait until the house was quiet and everyone was asleep before slipping into her room. The door would creak softly as he entered, and Lily, though uneasy, would feign sleep, hoping he'd leave. But Greg would sit on the edge of her bed, gently brushing her hair back and whispering, "You're such a good girl, Lily. I'm so proud of you." One night, she woke to find him sitting by her side, his hand resting lightly on her arm. "I couldn't sleep," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." As his visits continued, they grew longer. Greg began to touch her more, resting his hand on her shoulder, then letting it drift down to her arm. Lily would shrink away slightly, but he would only smile and say, "Don't be shy. I'm just making sure you're safe." There were nights when he'd bring her small gifts, a bracelet, a new book, or her favorite candy. "These are just for you," he'd say. "Our little secret." Lily didn't know how to refuse. She would mumble a quiet thank you, feeling trapped by his kindness. But soon, his actions escalated. He began sitting closer, leaning in to kiss her cheek, then her lips. Each time, Lily felt a pang of unease, but Greg's voice was always soothing, always reassuring. "This is just our special bond," he would whisper. "You're lucky to have someone who loves you so much." On nights when she locked her door, Greg would knock softly, calling out, "Lily, it's me. Open up. I just want to talk." His voice, though calm, carried an edge that made her hands tremble as she turned the lock. One particularly cold night, she woke to the sound of her door opening. Greg had a spare key. He walked in, carrying a blanket. "You looked cold," he said, draping it over her. But instead of leaving, he sat beside her, his hand resting on her knee. "I just want to protect you," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "You're special, Lily. You need someone to take care of you." Lily tried to avoid him during the day, retreating to her room or helping Aunt Clara in the kitchen. But Greg always found a way to corner her, pressing a hand to her back as he passed, brushing a strand of hair from her face, or whispering compliments that made her skin crawl. "You're so beautiful," he said one afternoon as she washed dishes. "It's no wonder everyone loves you." The more he encroached on her space, the more isolated Lily felt. Greg's manipulation ran deep. He reminded her constantly of everything he'd done for her: the roof over her head, the food on her plate, the clothes on her back. "Without me, where would you be?" he'd ask. "You owe me, Lily. All I ask is for your trust." By the time Lily turned 17, the weight of his presence had become unbearable. She was quieter than ever, her once bright eyes dulled by fear and confusion. She avoided eye contact, flinched at sudden movements, and rarely spoke unless spoken to. Aunt Clara began to notice. At first, she thought Lily was simply grieving her parents, but as time passed, she saw patterns that didn't sit right. Lily's avoidance of Greg, her reluctance to join family meals, the way she always seemed to shrink into herself whenever he was near, it all painted a troubling picture. Then, one day, Lily fell ill. The nausea came in waves, and she began vomiting frequently. At first, Aunt Clara assumed it was a stomach bug, but when the symptoms persisted, she decided to take Lily to the doctor. The doctor's words shattered Lily's world. She was pregnant. Aunt Clara was stunned. She demanded to know who the father was, but Lily, trembling and terrified, couldn't find the courage to speak. When they returned home, Greg pulled Lily aside, his face dark with anger. "If you tell anyone, I'll kill you," he hissed. "Do you hear me? I've done everything for you, paid your fees, given you a home, and this is how you repay me. Do you want to ruin this family? Do you want everyone to know how ungrateful you are?" Lily was paralyzed with fear. She didn't know what to do. She didn't even fully understand what was happening to her. All she knew was that her uncle, the man everyone trusted, was the source of her pain and confusion. Aunt Clara, however, wasn't blind to the signs. She noticed how Greg seemed unusually tense whenever Lily was around and how Lily seemed to shrink in his presence. Clara began to piece together the clues: Lily's fear, her silence, and the way she flinched whenever Greg came too close. One night, Clara waited until everyone was asleep and went into Lily's room. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she gently asked, "Lily, is there something you're not telling me? You can trust me." Lily broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Between tears, she told Clara everything: the nights Greg would sneak into her room, the threats, and how powerless she felt. Clara listened in shock, her heart breaking for the young girl who had been suffering in silence. The next morning, Clara took Lily and Jamie to a safe place and contacted the authorities. When the police arrived to arrest Greg, he tried to deny everything, but Lily's testimony and the medical evidence were enough to prove his guilt. Greg was sentenced to prison for his crimes. Lily, though scarred by the experience, found solace in the fact that she was finally free. Aunt Clara stood by her side, offering unwavering support as Lily began the long process of healing. The road to recovery wasn't easy, but Lily found strength in therapy and the love of those who believed her. Her story became a powerful reminder that the most beautiful facades can hide the darkest secrets, and that speaking out, no matter how difficult, can bring light to the shadows.